In a small town nestled between rolling hills stood a building dedicated to the community, the local library. It was a quaint place filled with the smell of old books and the comforting hum of quiet conversations. Today was different, though. The sun streamed through the tall windows, casting golden light on the polished wooden floors. Evelyn, a librarian with a warm smile and kind eyes, had just finished sorting a new shipment of books when she noticed a face from her past drifting through the door. The figure walked in quietly, almost as if he didn't want to be seen. It was Jake, her first love, the boy who had once made her heart race and her insides feel like butterflies. Time had changed him just as it had changed her. He looked older, weighed down by life's burdens, but that familiar spark was still there. He turned and waved, a hesitant smile tugging at his lips. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. They hadn't spoken in years. In high school, they were inseparable, sharing dreams and laughter under the stars, but life had happened. College pulled them in different directions. Relationships came and went, filled with their own heartache and joy. Now, seeing him again, a flood of memories washed over Evelyn, and she hurried to greet him. Jake, her voice was steady, but inside she felt like a whirlwind. "Hey, Evelyn." His smile was warm, reassuring her that the years apart hadn't changed everything. They exchanged small talk, filling in the gaps of their lives, reminiscing about their school days and the silly things they used to do. There was a comfort in the rhythm of their conversation, a rhythm that felt like home. As they talked, Evelyn noticed a glimmer of something in Jake's eyes, a sadness that lingered just below the surface. She wanted to reach out to comfort him, but the moment felt fragile. Just as the air grew heavy with unspoken words, Jake pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket. "I'm back in town for a while," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I came to see how things are, but also..." He unfolded the paper and revealed a set of figures that he had written down. He had found some success in his career, and he wanted to give back to the community. The library, he said, had meant a lot to him. Evelyn felt a swell of emotion. "That's amazing, Jake." They turned their conversation to the library's ongoing projects. As they spoke, something deep within her longed to ask why he had left without a word, why it had taken him years to come back, but she stopped herself. Maybe there were things better left unspoken. Hours passed as they caught up, a feeling of comfort settling between them. Just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, bathing the library in a warm orange glow, Jake shifted in his seat, as if a weight was on his mind. "There's something I need to show you," he said, standing up. Curiosity piqued, Evelyn followed him to a small room at the back of the library, one usually reserved for meetings. He took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside was a small gathering. A few common faces from the town had gathered, people who appreciated everything the library did for the community. Jake explained his idea to everyone in the room, a donation to renovate the library to keep it thriving for years to come. Evelyn watched his passion ignite as he spoke, his words painting a picture of a new library, a hub for creativity and social exchange. Everyone in the room listened, nodding along, clearly moved by his vision. For a brief moment, Evelyn felt proud of him, of what he wanted to do for the town. But then, as the meeting wrapped up, she sensed the atmosphere shift. It wasn't just excitement, there was an undercurrent of tension swirling beneath the surface. Suddenly, someone mentioned a plaque. A tradition in their town was to honor donors with a plaque, showcasing their contributions. Jake seemed to freeze at those words, and for a moment his mask slipped. His expression shifted, a flicker of something dark in his eyes, something that spoke of regret or perhaps fear. He muttered, his voice quiet. Evelyn's heart raced, and a whisper of panic settled in her chest. The room began to buzz again, but she could hardly focus on the chatter. The door creaked open, and in stepped a town official with a folder in hand. He had a confident air about him, ready to lay out the next steps. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice booming. "We're thrilled about the donation." Evelyn could feel Jake tense beside her. He glanced sideways, and she saw his once bright eyes dim with uncertainty. What if he didn't want his name up there? What if there was a deeper reason behind his hesitation? As if sensing her worry, he turned to her. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. She nodded, anxious but intrigued, and they stepped into the cool autumn air. Outside, the air felt alive with the spirit of the town, but here, under the quiet evening sky, it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. She asked, a mixture of concern and curiosity in her voice. He took a shaky breath and ran his fingers through his hair. Evelyn felt a shiver down her spine. The last time they were together, it wasn't a happy memory. They had fought over something trivial: jealousy, misunderstandings. It had been one of those stupid teenage fights that led to a silence so deep it echoed through the years. "Of course," she replied quietly. "I never meant for it to end like that," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I left town and I always felt like I should have come back, but then..." Evelyn could feel tears prick her eyes as she listened. "Life happens, Jake," he nodded, but there was something heavy in his gaze. "I know, but I've spent years feeling like I abandoned this place. And now with the library, I want to give back, but seeing my name on that plaque," she asked gently, her heart open to the truth unraveling before her. He exclaimed, frustration burning in his eyes. "It's just seeing that name like a stamp on something permanent. It makes me feel like I'm finally acknowledging my past, and Evelyn took a step closer, feeling the weight of their shared history press against her. You don't have to hide from it. We all have things we wish we could change or redo. He looked into her eyes, searching for something, maybe understanding, maybe forgiveness. I really do. Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her chest. You start by facing yourself. You took this step by coming back, Jake. That's the first part. We can't change what happened, but we can shape what's ahead. Don't let your signature on a plaque define you. For a moment, they stood in silence. The world around them blurred, and it was just the two of them together again after all these years, feeling the heartbeat of the town that had watched both their joys and mistakes unfold. Finally, Jake took a deep breath, and his shoulders relaxed. Okay, I'll sign. They walked back inside, a new energy fueling their steps. The meeting continued, and Evelyn watched as a newfound determination sparked in Jake's eyes. Whatever had happened in the past didn't matter as much anymore. They had a chance to rewrite their stories. At the end of the evening, amidst laughter and plans for the future, Jake took the pen and scrawled his name on the donation plaque. And as he stepped back, Evelyn turned to him, her heart racing with hope. The past wasn't gone, but it felt lighter somehow. She placed her hand on his arm, feeling once again the warmth of their connection. You did it, she whispered, a bright smile spreading across her face. Jake looked down at the plaque, and for the first time in what felt like forever, a genuine smile broke across his face. Yeah, I did, he replied, warmth in his voice, a spark of excitement lighting up the memories they shared. In that moment, beneath the soft glow of library lights, something profound shifted. They found themselves standing on the brink of a new beginning, the memories of the past drifting away like petals in the wind, leaving space for healing, hope, and possibly even love again. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm orange glow over the small town as Mia adjusted her apron in the bustling community center. The annual fundraiser was in full swing, and she could hear the chatter of excited voices blending with the soft music playing in the background. It was a day dedicated to bringing everyone together, raising money for local projects, and celebrating what made their community special. But amid the laughter and clinking glasses, a single moment drew her attention. At first, it was the way he walked in quietly, almost uncertain, keeping to the edge of the room. Even after all these years, Mia recognized him instantly. Jake, her first love, the one who had slipped away just as quickly as he had come into her life. He looked different, aged by the weight of time and choices, yet there was still a flicker of that old spark in his brown eyes. As he approached the donation table, Mia's heart raced. Memories flooded her mind, long drives under the stars, whispered secrets behind the school, and the sting of their final argument as they drifted apart. She swallowed hard, the tension in the air palpable. What was he doing here after all this time? Hey, he said, a soft smile breaking through his nervous demeanor. Mia felt as if the air had left her lungs. Time had carved out years of silence, but now standing before her, Jake didn't seem that far away. It's good to see you, she managed, feeling the weight of unspoken words linger between them. I've missed this place, he continued, glancing around the hall as if searching for more than just old memories. She nodded, unsure of where to take the conversation. Years of unanswered questions lingered in the space between them, and she wondered if today, of all days, might clear the fog. As Jake moved through the crowd, Mia followed him, feeling that familiar pull. The softness of his laughter and the effortless way he engaged with others reminded her of who he used to be. They exchanged small talk, reminisced about school, and oh, how she missed those simple days filled with innocence and hope. But just as the air thickened with excitement, the vibe shifted. An announcement cut through the celebration, drawing everyone's focus to the front of the room. Tom, the head of the community center, stood with a bright smile and a stack of donation forms in hand. As many of you know, our projects depend on the generosity of our community, Tom began. He paused, his eyes scanning the room, landing on Jake. Mia watched as Jake's face shifted from relaxed to tense. She murmured, unsure if it was meant for her or just the air that felt suddenly heavy. Tom held it aloft, revealing a shiny silver surface reflecting the laughter around them. The room erupted into applause, but Mia turned to Jake, her heart in her throat. He looked frozen, a mix of surprise and something darker playing across his expressive features. Memories of their past began to creep back in guilt, doubt, and the tumultuous end to their relationship. Mia felt compelled to say something, but before she could gather the courage, Jake bolted from the front of the room, slipping away into the shadows. A split second later, she made the decision to follow. The hallway was dimly lit, the laughter from the fundraiser fading into a distant echo. Mia found him leaning against the wall, his head bowed, a hand pressed to his forehead like he was trying to hold his thoughts together. She asked softly, stepping closer. He looked up, his expression raw. The frustration in his voice was palpable, and for a moment it seemed like he might crumble under the weight of it all. She inquired, searching for understanding. Yeah, but it's complicated. He gestured toward the hallway, where laughter still echoed. Mia felt a wave of sympathy washing over her. You can help without all the fanfare. He snapped, then let out a long breath, his shoulders sagging. I disappeared. Coming back means. Mia took a moment, letting his words settle like fine dust in the air. We all have things we want to escape from, but it doesn't mean you can't come back. People change, Jake. He met her gaze, and for a second the layers of hurt and regret flickered in his eyes. What if they don't forgive me? Mistakes don't define you, she replied gently. You walked away, but now you're back. Jake ran his fingers through his hair, visibly wrestling with his thoughts. His voice trailed off as if it were a physical weight pulling him downward. Mia stepped closer, narrowing the distance between them. It's okay to be scared, but this moment putting your name on that plaque, it's more than just words. It's a commitment to be part of this life again. You're not the only one who has ever made mistakes. Think of the kids who will benefit. His shoulders relaxed slightly, yet vulnerability still shimmered in his eyes. Mia paused, taking a breath. You've spent years carrying this burden. Let this be part of your journey forward instead of a chain holding you back. In that moment, she took a risk. Reaching out, she placed her hand on his arm, giving it a gentle squeeze. Jake looked down, his breath hitching as he processed her words. Please, she urged softly, her voice steady. Let this be your moment. You have a chance to reshape your story. He met her gaze, uncertainty flickering through his eyes. They already do, she replied, smiling. They're ready to welcome you back. Just be honest with them. After what felt like an eternity, Jake took a deep breath, the tension around him starting to ease. Okay, I'll do it, he said, his voice strong, though the apprehension lingered. As they made their way back to the main hall, Mia could feel the buzz of emotions swirling around them. The applause had faded, but the energy in the room was still electric. She stepped aside, allowing Jake to walk to the front. Tom stood waiting for him, the plaque held low so that the letters glinted in the light like stars in an eager night sky. The room quieted, eyes turning toward Jake as he took his place. The moment felt heavy, charged with expectation. As Mia watched, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swelling within her. Jake was no longer the boy who'd run from the past. He was here, ready to face it head-on, wearing courage like a shining armor. Jake cleared his throat, the room instantly falling into a hush. He hesitated, his voice wavering. I know I've been gone for a long time. He paused, eyes scanning the crowd filled with familiar faces. Mia's heart raced. Could he really embrace this moment? Would he share everything? I believe in what this community represents, he continued, his voice growing steadier. And I want to give back not just for the kids or the projects, but for all of you who have kept this place alive. Applause began to rise again, filling the room like a warm embrace. With shaking hands, Jake picked up the pen, a symbol of new beginnings, and signed the plaque. As he stepped back, Mia felt a swell of emotion, not just for him, but for everything that had been and everything that was yet to come. The moment felt profound, marked by the sunlight streaming through the windows, illuminating Jake's face, making it impossible to ignore the journey he had taken. The fingerprints of the past may linger, but with that name on the plaque, they could begin to fade. Jake turned, a light in his eyes that hadn't been there before, and for the first time he smiled genuinely. Thank you, Mia, he said, the weight of his words unmistakable. She asked, her own heart racing with warmth. In that instant, everything clicked into place. The years apart hadn't dulled the bond they had shared, and neither had it tarnished their capacity to grow. The past wouldn't define them, it had shaped them into who they were today. Together, they stepped back into the throng of laughter and joy, unshackled from fear, united by hope and possibility. The community was ready to welcome back one of its own, and for Mia and Jake, this was just the beginning of a new chapter. The weight of the past became a foundation for building something brighter, and in the heart of it all, they discovered that sometimes it's not about the plaque, but what it represents, the promise of a fresh start. The air was thick with anticipation, mingled with the sweet scent of fresh-baked pastries wafting from the community center's kitchen. On this crisp Saturday morning, the place buzzed with the excitement of the annual charity auction. Donations lined the table's handmade crafts, local artwork, gift baskets bursting with treats, all ready to be bid on. People gathered in small groups, laughing and chatting, but Mia felt a stir of unease gnawing at her stomach. Just as she finished arranging a last-minute display, the door creaked open. The crowd momentarily turned, and Mia's heartbeat quickened. There he was, Jake. After all these years, he stepped into her life again, as if time had folded back on itself. His eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly on familiar faces, but when they landed on her, they froze. Mia stood still, caught in a web of memories and emotions. The laughter faded into the background, swallowed by the weight of their shared past. Jake was different. He looked older, shoulders a little heavier than she remembered. Life had etched new lines on his face, but that same mischievous spark was still there in his eyes. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. He approached with hesitant steps, like a man testing the waters of an uncertain sea. Hey, he said, his voice a soft brush against the tension. Yeah, I help organize it every year, she replied, unsure of how to navigate old wounds. I know, he nodded, and there was a pause filled with the weight of unspoken words. Their eyes locked, each trying to gauge the other's feelings. Memories flared up like fireflies, laughter at summer bonfires, late-night confessions whispered by the river, and the moment everything shattered. Jake had left without explanation, and the silence that followed had cut deeper than she ever acknowledged. The sound of a bell chimed, breaking the moment. Tom, the center's director, called out, pulling the attention back to the front. Mia felt the invitation tug at her as Jake stepped back, glancing at the crowd as if searching for his place among them. "Seems like they need us," he said, a hint of relief lighting up his expression. As they moved closer to the front, the crowd began to settle down, the buzz transforming into an eager hush. Tom stood at the podium with a gleaming plaque in one hand and a broad smile on his face. "Today, we're grateful to announce the contributions of some very special people," he began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Mia shifted, her anticipation mingled with unease. She could see the gleam of the plaque reflecting the bright overhead lights, a symbol of altruism and community. But what caught her breath was the way Jake's expression shifted, a flash of apprehension flickering across his features, disappearing just as quickly as it had come. The name sent a shockwave through Mia as if it echoed off the very walls around them. The crowd erupted in applause, but all Mia could do was watch as Jake momentarily froze, his smile faltering. He hadn't prepared for this. As Jake moved to the front, Mia could see the conflict written all over him. What was he feeling? She could almost hear the swirling storm of emotions in his mind, the excitement of being acknowledged battling with the ghosts of his past decisions. Tom handed Jake the plaque. "Your donation will help the community in ways we can't even begin to explain." Jake hesitated before taking the plaque, holding it like a delicate piece of glass that might shatter in his hands. "Thank you, everyone," he managed to say, his voice slightly unsteady. Mia saw the tension in his posture and it pushed her into action. She rushed up to the stage, startling even herself. She called out, the crowd turning as she stepped into his orbit. When their eyes met again, there were two stars colliding, a mix of warmth and old hurt. She whispered, genuine concern coloring her words. He trailed off, glancing at his name on the plaque. Her heart ached at the sight of him so conflicted. "It's just a plaque, Jake," he asked, perplexed. "This plaque, this moment, don't you see? I left." "I get that," she replied, her voice steady. "But the past doesn't define you." The crowd slowly began to disperse, and though Jake was still standing there, lost in thought, Mia could see the walls he had built crumbling. The words came rushing out, fueled by something deep inside her. "You're giving them a chance to see the person you are now. You're allowing them to forgive, and that's powerful." Jake's brow furrowed, and the weight of her words seeped into him. "I never expected to come back," he admitted, voice low. "I didn't expect you to come back either," she confessed, heat rising to her cheeks. "But you did, and perhaps," a flicker of understanding passed between them. But just then Mia's phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the moment. She pulled it out and quickly scanned a text. Her heart sank. "I have to," she started, but Jake took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. He asked softly. Mia hesitated, torn between the responsibility tugging her away and the magnetic pull drawing her toward him, but something in his voice ignited a spark of courage. "Okay," she agreed, trying to steady her nerves. He visibly relaxed. She inquired, unable to hide her curiosity. "Be honest about myself," he replied, an urgency creeping into his tone. "I've spent so long hiding from who I was. Now that I'm here, it feels different." "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," she reassured him, her heart racing against the weight of his vulnerability. "You're already here trying to make amends." His eyes softened as he nodded, and there was a stillness that enveloped them, punctuated only by the distant laughter echoing from the main hall. "I really do want to help this place," he sighed. Mia studied him, searching for a piece of the boy she once knew. "You can be that person," she promised. "We all mess up." He looked down at the plaque still held tightly in his hands, contemplating her words. "They will," she urged, the conviction in her voice buoying both of them. "The fact that you're here facing the past is a big step." A spark ignited in his eyes, and for a moment they stood together, locked in their shared understanding of mistakes made and a future that awaited them. Jake asked suddenly, eyes alight with new possibilities. Not just for the plaque, but for the town. Mia's heart swelled. "That's brilliant," she encouraged. "Share your story, be vulnerable. People appreciate authenticity." He smiled, the tension leaving his body like a bird taking flight. "I know they would be," she replied, feeling a rush of optimism. The air around them was filled with hope, a chance at renewal spiraling into existence. Just then, another wave of people streamed into the hallway, laughter spilling as they rejoined the festivities. Mia felt the moment slip away, but she didn't want to leave Jake in this uncertain place. She proposed, her mind racing with ideas. He asked, astonishment lighting up his expression. "Of course," she said, the smile breaking across her face. He studied her for an extra beat, his deep brown eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you, Mia. We all need hope," she assured him, feeling the energy shift. As the laughter echoed through the hall, Mia felt a weight lifting. They shared a silent vow of promise to navigate this new chapter together, blending their pasts into a more vibrant future. Later that evening, as the auction concluded and the last guests filtered out, Mia lingered at the front, watching as Jake signed the guest book. She couldn't shake the feeling that this moment marked more than just a charity event. It was the start of something beautiful. Looking back at the plaque, she noticed his name glinting under the warm light. It wasn't just a reminder of where he had been, but a beacon of where he could go, and a testament to the power of second chances. As he joined her by the door, there was a lightness in the air, a sense that this was just the beginning. And together they stepped into the cool night, ready to embrace the future they would build, one honest word at a time. The community center buzzed with energy as people mingled, laughter spilling into the hallway where Sarah stood. She adjusted her scarf, casting a nervous glance around the room. It was the annual benefit, a time when everyone came together to support local projects, and each year, Sarah took pride in her role of organizing it all. But this year felt different. This year had a weight she couldn't shake. A sudden hush fell over the room as Tom, the head of the center, approached the podium. He was about to announce the newest addition to the donation plaque, a beloved tradition where donors' names were immortalized. Sarah's heart raced at the thought of seeing that plaque adorned with new names of people dedicated to the town. Just as Tom began to speak, a figure appeared at the back of the room. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Jake. After all those years, he returned. The boy who once filled her days with joy now stood at the edge of her memory, a ghost come to haunt her. The years melted away, and suddenly she was swept back to evenings spent under starlit skies, whispering dreams and secrets. Then came the memories of heartbreak, the silence that followed his abrupt departure. Tonight, I want to thank a special donor, Tom's voice echoed, pulling Sarah back to the present. He said the name as if it were a hammer strike against glass. The sound shattered her composure. She watched as the crowd erupted into applause, but Jake's face froze, as if he were obliterated in that very moment. She could see the way his breath caught, and for a brief flicker, she recognized the familiar storm behind his eyes, a mix of pride and regret. This was not how she expected to see him again. He had left without a word, and now he was here. For a fleeting moment, Sarah felt the weight of their shared history, rich and layered. But right then, Jake's expression shifted. The applause felt frantic. He was struggling against something deep inside, caught between joy and the dread of returning home after a long absence. As Jake stepped toward the stage, Sarah couldn't help but feel his anxiety ripple through the air, stirring her own insecurities. What would he say? Would he speak about the past? Would he ignore it all and embrace a new chapter and leave her to drown in the echoes of who they were? "Thank you, everyone," Jake began, the microphone in his hand trembling slightly. His voice cracked, and she could see the raw honesty spilling out, a man torn between past choices and the bright, glaring light of the present. The crowd watched, captivated, and Sarah could hardly breathe. In the distance, she caught sight of the gleaming donation plaque, reflecting the glow of the overhead lights. The sight tangled her emotions, and her heart raced as Jake continued, his gaze drifting over the audience, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his tough exterior. "There have been many things I wish I could change," he said, his voice growing stronger as he pushed through the memory of his departure. "Being away from this place has been difficult." The words settled heavily in the room, a collective stillness hanging over the guests. For a moment she felt time freeze, as if the world had enshrouded them in silence, trapping Jake's remorse in the air. Sarah stood rooted, heart thumping against her chest. "I missed my home," he continued, shaking slightly as he spoke. "Honestly, I never thought I'd have the chance to come back, but I want to contribute." His honesty broke through the self-imposed barriers that had kept them apart for so long. Mia felt tears well in her eyes. Was he really trying to reach for forgiveness? "Before I finish, I want to say how grateful I am to be back, surrounded by people who supported me even when I was away." The applause that erupted felt explosive, a wave of acceptance washing over him. Jake smiled hesitantly, and for the first time she saw the corner of his mouth twitch in a way that felt like hope. But as the noise filled the room, Jake's gaze drifted past the crowd toward the set of donation forms and that damn plaque. It was like watching a rubber band stretch too far before snapping back with devastating force. I'm honored to be here, but there's something more," he stammered. A shudder ran through him. Took a step back, and Sarah felt her heart leap into her throat as he registered something behind her. He had spotted the plaque, the very name he had signed in commitment to their town. In that instant, his face drained of color. It was as if a shadow had washed over him. Jake looked like he might crumble under the weight of all he had left unspoken. The applause faltered, shifting into confusion as he stared at the plaque, his world refracted through the polished metal that now gleamed in the spotlight. Wait, he said, panic rising in his voice. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, a mixture of surprise and concern. Tom stepped forward, confusion furrowing his brow. Yes, Jake, that struck her hard. He hadn't just come back, he had agreed to the donation, to the public acknowledgement of his return. All the weight he carried seemed to collapse in on him, an implosion of feeling. Was he scared of what he had committed to? Did he think the past would bubble to the surface? With a shaky smile that didn't reach his eyes, Jake looked back at the audience. He stumbled over his words. "I didn't think about the history behind that act." Mia felt a jolt of empathy ripple through her. The ghosts of their past whispered in echoes, and she realized that he wasn't afraid of the plaque itself, but what it represented. Jake was trapped between wanting to change and being burdened by what he had left behind. "Jake," she called, the uncertainty of what to say twisting in her stomach. "It's just a symbol, a way to show the community you want to be part of it again." But Jake shook his head, and in that moment he was the boy she once knew, the one who had always felt too much, too deeply. But what if people see that name and only think of the mistakes? The room fell eerily silent. The emotional tension was palpable. Everyone could feel the gravity of his internal battle. Eyes turned expectantly toward him, as if willing him to overcome the storm raging inside. People are capable of forgiveness, Sarah urged, her own heart racing. You don't need to hide from it. You standing here is your chance to show growth, and others will see that too. His gaze darted around the audience. The faces that had once known him as the carefree boy now switched to tentative adults, unsure of the man he had become. It was a reflection of insecurity she had felt time and again, but it was different now. Their connection had changed. I don't know how, he murmured, almost to himself. A realization surged through her. Maybe it was not just about the Plaq, but about truly stepping forward into an uncertain future, one that could embrace who they once were while also allowing them to redefine themselves. Jake, she said firmly, stepping closer. You're not here to erase the past, you're here to build something new. This community isn't about holding grudges, it's about growth. Use this moment to be honest with yourself. He looked at her, eyes wide with uncertainty, but there was a flicker of determination ignited within. But what if they don't accept me? Then you try again, she responded passionately. A meaningful silence fell between them as he took a deep breath, processing her words. The applause had died down, leaving a quiet intimacy surrounding them. With every heartbeat, Sarah felt the connection shift, a bridge forming between their past and the futures they could forge. He looked back at the audience, searching for strength in the familiar faces. I can't change what happened. But I'm here now, and I'm going to try my best to show you that I am different, that I've learned. The crowd erupted into applause, a wave of support that washed over him, but this time it wasn't just clapping hands, they were clapping hearts. Sarah watched as Jake embraced the release of his burden, the corners of his mouth turning up into a genuine smile as the energy shifted around him. He turned back to Sarah, gratitude pouring from those warm brown eyes. Thank you, he whispered. I didn't expect this. As the applause faded and the murmurs began to dissipate, Sarah felt a sense of peace blossom within her too. They were both finding their way back together, step by step. And as they rejoined the crowd, the embrace of community wrapped around them like a warm blanket, a reminder that the past doesn't define them but shapes the way they step forward into new beginnings. Together, the community center buzzed with excitement. It was the annual fundraising gala, and the atmosphere was alive with laughter, colorful decorations, and the enticing smell of fresh pastries and coffee. People mingled, sharing stories and reconnecting after another year had flown by. As Sarah adjusted the name tags at the check-in table, her mind wandered, anticipating the moment when the plaques would be revealed. Long before the gala, they had discussed the new donation plaques, each one a small tribute to those who had given generously to support community projects. What she hadn't anticipated was her heart beginning to race as she thought of who might be honored this year. Memories of Jake flickered in her mind, the boy who made her laugh, who had the kind of smile that lit up everything around him, and who had walked away without a word. Just then, the door creaked open, and in walked a familiar figure. Instinctively, Sarah's stomach tightened. There he was, Jake Matthews. Time had changed him, she could see that clearly. His hair was a little longer, and the youthful spark she had once adored had dimmed slightly, but he was undeniably still Jake. The boy who had once filled her entire childhood was now a man standing awkwardly at the entrance as if he wasn't sure where he belonged. Sarah froze at the sight of him. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest, memories flooding her thoughts. There was the summer they spent lying on the grassy hill, gazing up at the stars, believing they would always be together. But reality had shattered that illusion with Jake's sudden departure years ago, leaving only questions and unresolved feelings in his wake. She hesitated for a moment, and then he spotted her. Their eyes locked, and the air between them crackled with an old familiarity wrapped in uncertainty. He walked towards her with tentative steps, the weight of unspoken history hanging heavy in the air. "Hi, Sarah," he said, his voice steady but laced with an underlying tension. Yeah, she replied, forcing a smile despite the butterflies raging in her stomach. The awkward silence stretched between them. Familiar emotions threatened to bubble over, anger and hurt coiled tightly in her chest. She finally managed to ask, the question tumbling out before she could hold it back. Jake's eyes flickered for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "I wanted to check in." He paused, scratching the back of his head. Before she could respond, the sound of clinking glasses signaled that the event was about to start. Tom, the community center director, took center stage, his voice booming over the chatter. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please." Jake's anxious energy was palpable. Sarah could sense the tension rolling off him as he shifted on his feet, contemplating whether to retreat or stay. But before she could question him again or ask him to stay, Tom continued. Suddenly, the ice in her chest shattered and panic replaced it. The plaques, did he contribute? Regret washed over her like a wave crashing on a rocky shore. She had been so focused on her own feelings, she hadn't even thought about his involvement. Would his name be on the plaque? "Jake," she said, urgency in her voice. His expression shifted, uncertainty clouding his eyes. Yes, Sarah felt her heart sink. This wasn't just a casual reunion, it was tangled in history and expectations. The air felt thick around them as Tom continued to speak, outlining the contributions for the evening. As many of you know, we rely on the generosity of the community to keep our projects going. It's heartening to see our past members returning to support us, Tom said, his voice full of warmth. And I want to take a moment to highlight the incredible donation from Jake Matthews, a former resident of our town. The room erupted into applause, but for Jake, it felt like an avalanche of pressure. He hesitated, glancing at Sarah, searching for encouragement, but she could only offer an empathetic nod. What was he feeling? Did he know the memories that were being unearthed? Jake stepped up to the stage, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. He stood before the crowd, visibly tense, the weight of his name, his past bearing down on him. "Thank you, everyone," Jake began, his voice slightly shaky yet filled with sincerity. "Coming back here tonight is..." Sarah leaned in, captivated. The room quieted, all eyes on him, waiting to hear what he would say. "I'm grateful to be back in a place that means so much to me," he continued. "But I recognize that my past here is complicated." The confession hung in the air as Sarah's heart ached. He was genuinely grappling with the hurt he had caused. But she noticed a shift when the murmurs floated through the crowd. They seemed to remember, but they also seemed inclined to forgive, much to Jake's credit. But tonight, he pushed forward, determination creeping into his voice. "I want to give back to this place that shaped me so much." Applause erupted again, this time more heartfelt. But Sarah noticed Jake's expression begin to flicker with uncertainty. He gazed down at the table where the donation plaques were resting. He hesitated, craning his neck to read the plaque that bore his name. That name, his name was there, etched forever in this moment, but it was more than a tribute, it was a reminder of his past mistakes. He froze. Tom stepped forward, lifting the plaque so everyone could see. "Here it is, folks, Jake Matthews." Jake looked pale. He took an involuntary step back, as if the words had physically pushed him. For a moment, all joy drained from his face. "Wait," he breathed, his voice barely audible. "My name." The room shifted, the energy turning electric with confusion. Everyone could sense his turmoil. Sarah felt a rush of compassion blending with frustration. Was this moment overwhelming him? Did he really believe everyone had come to judge his past rather than honor his present? "Jake," she called out, pushing through the crowd, all at once caught up in a whirlwind of emotion. But the panic in his eyes deepened. "You don't get it, Sarah. That's saying I'm here to stay." She felt her voice rising. "Let them see a new you." He looked at her for a moment, a flicker of hope igniting before fear extinguished it. "But what if they never understand?" The audience began to murmur louder, anticipation lingering in the charged air. Sarah felt as though the eyes of the entire town were scanning Jake, reliving their stories, wrestling with their memories and judgments. "It's more than that, Jake. You're giving them a reason to see the real you." The crowd seemed to hold its breath, waiting for him to respond. Jake's gaze fell to the plaque, wrestling with his own insecurities and past mistakes. Slowly, the heaviness within him seemed to dissipate, replaced with determination. He straightened his posture. Okay, you're right," he said, voice steadying. "I have to face this." A soft applause began, and Sarah watched as the crowd and Jake shifted from uncertainty into acceptance. He took a step toward the plaque and then another, inspired by a spark of bravery. The truth was escaping his lips, raw and unguarded. "I'm here to make things right," he declared louder, filling the space with conviction. The audience erupted into applause, a thunderous roar of acceptance that filled the hall. For so long they had waited for him to come back, and now he was finally here, face to face with the very people who had supported him during his absence. At that moment, Sarah felt a rush of warmth. She was witnessing a transformation, a reclamation of the past, one that was no longer a source of shame but a foundation for growth. As the applause faded, Jake turned to her, a newfound light reflecting in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, urgency behind his words. "Thank you for pushing me." She forced a smile, her heart swelling with pride. "You've always had the strength, Jake. You just needed a push," she said, their eyes locking with unspoken understanding. As the night continued, laughter and chatter filled the room, but in that moment, Sarah and Jake found solace in their shared journey. They might have come from different places, one shaped by actions and the other shaped by memories, but here, under the gleaming light of the donation plaque, hope blossomed anew. Jake was no longer a man haunted by his past. He was a man ready to embrace the future, slopes of hope rising in the distance. And for Sarah, she could finally see that he wasn't just reclaiming a part of himself. He was rediscovering the boy who had once made her feel like anything was possible. Together, they began to step forward, eagerly embracing everything that lay ahead. The community hall felt electric with anticipation. People buzzed with excitement, and the air brimmed with the scent of delicious food, homemade pies, roasted chicken, and the unmistakable aroma of fresh coffee. This was the night the town came together for its annual charity gala, and it was a tradition that no one wanted to miss. Laughter echoed in every corner of the room as friends and neighbors mingled, sharing stories that had unfolded over the past year. But for Emma, the festive atmosphere was clouded by a looming sense of nostalgia. She stood near the entrance, adjusting name tags on tables, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't quite pinpoint. Her eyes scanned the crowd, lingering on the familiar faces she'd grown up with, faces filled with warmth and laughter. Yet deep within her, a knot twisted tighter with each passing moment. Then the door swung open and time itself seemed to halt. A chill ran down Emma's spine as she recognized him immediately. Jake, the boy who had once shared her dreams under starry skies, who had left without a word, vanishing into thin air. Years had passed since he had slipped away, but the memories flooded back, vivid and uninvited. She could almost hear the echoes of their laughter, feel the warmth of his presence beside her. Jake stepped inside, hesitating for just a moment. He looked the same yet different, older, perhaps wearier. His hair was a little darker, the corners of his eyes crinkled from laughter and tears of life, but that unmistakable spark still flickered in his gaze. Her heart pounded. She felt a mix of joy and anxiety swirling within her, a cocktail of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. Would he acknowledge her? Did he even want to? As if sensing her stare, Jake turned and their eyes locked. A flicker of recognition danced across his face, quickly replaced by an uncertainty that tightened the knot in her stomach. Emma's breath caught in her throat. What would he say? What could she say? Just then, the crowd began to chant, "Jake, Jake." Tom, the director of the community center, had spotted him and was ushering him toward the front of the room. The applause grew as Jake walked forward, but he looked frozen in place, clearly grappling with the weight of expectations. Tom cleared his throat, his presence commanding the attention of the room. His voice boomed throughout the hall, a blend of warmth and enthusiasm that took everyone's attention away from their conversations. Emma's heart raced as she watched Jake sink under the weight of those words. It wasn't just a proclamation, it was a declaration, a reminder of the boy who had left and the man he had kept hidden for years. She could see the flush of uncertainty creeping up his neck. Hey everyone, Jake said, his voice wavering as he adjusted the microphone. He hesitated, looking at the crowd and then back at the plaque being prepared for display, the one that would immortalize his name among the stories of this town. Emma's tension rose. Would he speak about his time away? Would he refer to the reasons that had driven him to leave? She thought of the moments they had shared, the plans they had made, and how abruptly everything had changed. A small cheer emerged from the crowd, the warmth enveloping him like a blanket. But I also know that my past here is complicated, a word that encapsulated everything. The crowd leaned in closer, eager to hear where he would take this. Sarah's hands clenched around the table edge. She felt as if they were both standing an inch away from a cliff's edge. In leaving, he admitted, struggling with his words, I didn't just leave my friends, my family. I left behind responsibilities, commitments. Each word fell like a stone, drawing the audience in deeper, and Emma felt the stirrings of old wounds as Jake continued. A ripple of understanding washed over the room. No one in that crowd was unfamiliar with mistakes or regret. Jake stood vulnerable, exposing his soul in front of them. I'm here tonight because I want a chance to make things right. He paused, taking a deep breath, to show you all that I can change. At that moment, something shifted in Emma. With every sentence, Jake peeled away layers of his old self, exposing the raw vulnerability beneath. The boy she had loved was there, standing before them, but he was also transformed. But as he gazed at the plaque waiting to bear his name, a flicker of panic danced across his features. Suddenly, he froze. The applause turned muted as his eyes widened. Wait, he murmured nearly to himself. Tom nodded encouragingly, misreading the shift in Jake's demeanor. Of course, yet Jake seemed to step back from the stage, backing into the shadows of uncertainty. Emma sensed the tension tightening around him. I didn't think about how that would feel, he whispered, visibly shaken. The soft applause gradually drowned out as the crowd began to look at each other, confusion swirling in the air. Emma could almost feel the whirlwind of emotions roaring around them. Jake, she called out, her heart pounding in her chest. It's just a plaque, but he shook his head, uncertainty clouding his blue eyes. You don't understand. It's more than just a name. It's a statement, a declaration that I'm here now. Emma shot back, stepping closer to him, the concerns of the crowd fading into white noise. People are capable of forgiveness, Jake. You returning is proof of that. Jake's gaze fell to the floor, struggling against the weight of her words. Emma felt a wave of warmth surge through her in that moment. She stepped forward, gripping his shoulder as if anchoring him to the present. This is your chance to turn the page. You can't change your past, but you can choose how you face the future. At that moment, Jake focused on her, and she could see the shift as possibilities began to flash across his face like a spark catching fire. He glanced back at the plaque and then at her. I know they will, Emma assured him. You're not standing alone, Jake. The atmosphere in the room shifted as Jake's posture seemed to straighten. He took a deep breath, eyes locking back onto the audience. As the audience waited, breaths held, Emma felt the tide turning. Jake's vulnerability had cracked open the door to something new. She encouraged softly, her heart racing with hope. Just be honest. With newfound resolve, Jake stepped forward again, gazing out over the crowd of familiar faces. Thank you for accepting me as I am, for allowing me to try again. I know I have to earn your trust, earn my place back here. The applause boomed loudly, washing over him like a tide of acceptance. Relief flooded his features. Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride at his bravery. This moment, this willingness to embrace the past was everything. And as the applause faded, Jake turned back to her, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You've always had the strength inside you, Jake. You just needed to let it out," she replied, her voice warm and sincere. The night wore on, but the moment lingered like a warm embrace. As Jake moved through the gala, he became a part of the fabric of the event once again, his laughter mingling with the crowd. The guilt that once shrouded him began to dissipate, replaced by a hope that felt infectious. Through conversations filled with shared memories and rekindled connections, Emma watched Jake charm every person he encountered. He was no longer the boy who had run. He was a man stepping firmly into his identity, ready to face whatever lay ahead. And as Emma joined the festivities, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. They were both finding their way back piece by piece, ready to embrace the complexity of their pasts while forging a new future together. Under the twinkling lights of the community center, surrounded by laughter, acceptance, and support, Emma knew this night was not only about honoring contributions, but also about the resurrection of old bonds and the thrilling possibility of new beginnings. As the evening drew to a close, Jake approached her, his expression filled with newfound confidence. "Let's face tomorrow together," he said, his voice steady. Emma nodded, a bright smile spreading across her face. "Together," she echoed. And in that moment they understood that while the past would always be a part of them, it wouldn't define who they had the potential to become. The road ahead was blank and uncharted, but they were eager to walk it side by side, ready to embrace whatever awaited them. The community center was alive with energy, the air thick with laughter and the tantalizing scent of homemade dishes. People gathered around tables laden with baked goods, ready to bid on items for the annual charity auction. Sarah stood at the entrance, adjusting her name tag as she watched the lively commotion. The event was her baby, and she took great pride in organizing it each year. But this year felt different, charged with a tension she couldn't shake. As she scanned the crowd, her heart stumbled when she spotted a familiar figure, Jake. After all this time, there he was, standing in the doorway, hesitating as if he were a ghost trying to decide whether to stay or fade away. Jake had been her first love, the guy who made her laugh until her sides hurt, someone who filled her life with warmth and adventure. But several years ago, he vanished without warning, leaving behind memories tinged with bitterness and confusion. Now, seeing him again pulled at the fragments of her heart, a mix of nostalgia and unresolved pain. She murmured to herself, feeling the knot in her stomach twist tighter. What was she supposed to say? What was he doing here? Uncertain, she watched as he took a tentative step inside. Jake looked different, older and perhaps a bit haggard, but that familiar spark was still in his eyes. The laughter around them faded into a distant hum as their gazes locked. Time felt like it had stopped, the past crashing into the present in a chaotic whirl. "Sarah," he said softly, as if he was still unsure if he could say her name without repercussions. The word barely escaped her lips, heavy with emotions she hadn't dared to embrace. Before she could gather her thoughts, Tom, the community center director, took the stage and called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight." The crowd turned eagerly toward Tom, but Sarah couldn't shake her unwavering focus on Jake. What was he thinking? Did he feel the tension that hung in the air, taut like a tightly pulled string? "Tonight we have a very special announcement. We want to recognize our generous donors this year," Tom continued, his voice ringing through the hall. As Jake stepped forward, Emma's heart thundered. She hadn't thought about the implications of his return, nor how he would feel getting back into the same space where everything had gone wrong. Would he acknowledge the past? Would he just brush it aside? "And I'd like to take a moment to reveal the donation plaque for this year," Tom added, the thrill in his voice palpable. Jake's face went pale. He hesitated, and Emma watched as emotions flickered across his features, nerves mixed with a hint of regret. What was he feeling right now? How could one name on a plaque pull him to the brink like this? "Jake, if you're ready," Tom encouraged, gesturing toward the plaque. As people clapped and cheered, Jake's gaze swept the audience. It landed on the plaque, light reflecting against polished metal. For a heartbeat, it felt as if he was looking in a mirror, seeing not just his name but memories etched in every letter. "Thank you," he began, his voice shaky. I really didn't expect this. Returning to the town where I grew up is..." Sarah's heart twisted. Was he about to open up about all the things they had never spoken about, the absence, the confusion? "I know I made mistakes. I walked away without saying goodbye," he admitted, his voice gaining strength. "And not a day has gone by when I didn't think about the people I hurt." It was raw and genuine, and a wave of understanding washed through the crowd. Emma could practically feel the empathy flooding the space, drawing them all closer together. They had known him as the boy who left, but he was now showing them the man who wanted to return. Then a flash of anxiety crossed his face. He stood frozen, as if the weight of reality came crashing down. "And now I have my name," he whispered, his eyes widening. An uncomfortable hush descended upon the room. Sarah felt her heart skip. What was he thinking? Did he believe they would only remember the past rather than embracing the fact that he was trying to come back? "Yes, Jake, that's what we're honoring tonight," Tom replied, misunderstanding his hesitation. But instead of relief, Jake's expression darkened. "No. You don't understand," he stammered. "It's more than just a name, it's a reminder." Suddenly, his vulnerability hung in the air like a heavy fog. The applause faded into silence, and Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Was he afraid of what people would think? "Jake," she managed to say, stepping closer, almost instinctively. "You're here to show them the person you are now, not just who you were." His gaze faltered, searching her face for reassurance. "They can," she replied firmly, her heart racing. "Look around you, everyone here knows what it's like to stumble. You're not alone, Jake." A flicker of hope ignited in his eyes, but doubt still clouded his expression. "Your past is not all you are," Sarah pressed. "You have a chance to show them how far you've come, to rewrite your story." At that moment, something shifted within him, a subtle unlocking of the door he had kept sealed for too long. Encouraged by her words, he took a deep breath, visibly absorbing the energy from the crowd. Maybe he could step through that door, reclaim what he thought he had lost forever. He murmured, gathering conviction. The crowd leaned in, the anticipation surging like a wave. They needed to hear him to feel his truth. Taking a step closer to the plaque, Jake steadied himself. "I'm not defined by my mistakes." The applause erupted, a thunderous wave of acceptance. He stood taller, renewed purpose radiating from him. Emma felt joy swell within her as she witnessed him embrace the moment to reclaim his identity. "Thank you for offering me this chance," Jake said, looking directly at the crowd. As he finished, the hall erupted with applause, cheers echoing off the walls. In that instant, Sarah knew this would mark a turning point for Jake. Stepping into his truth, leaving behind the shadows of regret, Tom nodded appreciatively as he placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. As Jake turned back to Sarah, tears welled in his eyes, gratitude pouring out of him. "Thank you for pushing me," he whispered. "You had it in you all along," she replied with a smile, feeling her heart expand. The night continued, filled with laughter and reconnecting. Conversation flowed freely, and Jake began to navigate his way through familiar faces, joy replacing doubt. It was as if he had been reborn under the warm lights of the community center, his story taking a new direction, one that embraced growth rather than shame. As the evening wore on, Emma felt a sense of peace wash over her. Watching Jake mingle, she recognized that they both were healing. They had both been shaped by their choices, but now they could step forward, leaving the past behind. In the following weeks, Sarah and Jake met often, discussing community projects and the plans he wanted to set in motion. Together, they worked on ways to help local youth programs, creating opportunities where none had existed before. Slowly, the town began to welcome Jake back, offering warmth and friendship instead of judgment. Each day brought new challenges, but it also brought moments of joy. Sarah watched as he flourished, the boy she had once known returning in bits and pieces, now wiser and more determined. One evening, as they worked late at the community center, Jake looked at her with a mix of gratitude and admiration. "I never realized how much I needed this place until I came back." "Because it is," she replied softly, glancing around at the hall that had once been a source of their shared memories. As they exchanged ideas about future initiatives, the weight of uncertainty seemed to lessen with each new plan they discussed. And in those shared moments, hope blossomed like wildflowers in spring. Days turned into weeks, and soon the town was buzzing with excitement. Jake organized a community event to raise funds for local schools. It felt like a true turning point, a celebration of not just his return, but also the commitment of the entire community to move forward together. Finally, the day of the event arrived. The sun shone brightly, casting a golden glow over the center. Laughter filled the air as families gathered to support the cause. Jake felt buoyant, a sense of belonging washing over him, and he turned to see Sarah beside him, her smile radiating joy. "You did this, Jake," she said, her voice warm. "Together," he replied, savoring the word. As the day unfolded, Jake took to the stage one last time, feeling everything palpable, the excitement, the love, the unity. He gathered himself to speak, and as he glanced out at the familiar faces looking back at him, he knew he was home. "Tonight, we are not just pledging money," he began, voice steady. "We are pledging our commitment to each other, to this community." Cheers erupted, echoing off the walls, and the warmth that enveloped him felt like a healing balm. He had finally stepped into himself past expectations, past sorrow, and now stood squarely within hope. In that incredible moment, Sarah felt her heart swell. She knew they had both found more than they had ever anticipated, a chance to rewrite their stories, to embrace growth amid uncertainty, to be honest with themselves and each other. As the night came to a close, surrounded by love and laughter, they both felt a renewed sense of purpose, a promise that together they could navigate the path ahead. This was what it meant to truly return and reclaim the life they had once dreamed of, a life filled with hope, connection, and a future bright with possibilities. The room was alive with chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the rustling of paper as people gathered for the annual charity gala at the community center. Laughter filled the air, yet amidst the vibrancy, a heavy cloud hung over Sarah. She stood by the entrance, adjusting her name tag, trying to shake off the sense of unease that had gripped her all day. As she peered into the crowd, her heart skipped a beat when she spotted him. Jake. It had been years since he had slipped away from their small town, a sudden departure that left only whispers of confusion and heartache. There he was, standing in the doorway like an echo of the past, a ghost made flesh. Jake had always been the one who made her heart race, the boy who shared her dreams and laughter, who filled her days with light. But his absence had turned those dreams into shadows, lingering reminders of what could have been. Now he stood on the edge of the bustling room, eyes scanning the walls as if trying to recollect memories hidden in the paint. Sarah felt a tight knot in her stomach. Would he approach? Did he even want to? The separation between them felt like a chasm, filled with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Suddenly, Tom, the director of the community center, stepped onto the makeshift stage, his voice booming with enthusiasm. "Thank you all for coming tonight." The crowd turned eagerly toward him, but Sarah's focus remained locked on Jake. She watched as a battle played out on his face, hesitation mixed with a desire to reconnect. Would this be the moment he addressed the past? Or was he here simply to check in and disappear again? The applause erupted, a wave of sound that washed over the room, pushing Jake forward. He took a hesitant step, the smile on his face not quite reaching his eyes. Something deeper churned behind that smile: nervousness, regret, uncertainty. The crowd cheered, and Sarah felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Memories floated through her mind like flotsam on a turbulent sea. Would he talk about the night he left? Promises unmade that lingered, hanging heavily in the air. As Jake approached the stage, he appeared more like a man walking into a storm than a returning hero. There was a pause, the kind of awkward silence that creeps in when the air thickens with unsaid words. When he reached the podium, he swallowed hard. "Thank you, everyone," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. He lifted his gaze to the crowd, the warmth of their support colliding with the weight of his past. "I know I left without saying goodbye. I can't change that," he continued, his voice gaining strength. He paused, clearly grappling with his emotions as he caught sight of the donation plaque set to honor his contribution. "Oh boy," he murmured under his breath, and for a moment Emma could see fear flash across his face. The audience waited in rapt silence, anticipation hanging in the air like an unspoken question. "The plaque," he said finally, turning slightly. "That's..." Expression faltered, and the weight of reality seemed to press down on him as he remembered the implications of that simple metal nameplate, the commitments, the expectations, the ghosts. Tom stepped forward with the plaque in hand, lifting it high so everyone could see. "And here it is, Jake Matthews." Jake froze, his eyes wide as he stared at his name gleaming under the lights. "Wait," he breathed, clearly struggling to process. Sarah could see the color draining from his face, his panic rising like a tide. "My name..." The room turned electric. The applause from a moment ago faded into confused murmurs. Sarah felt her heart race as she realized the turmoil twisting within him. She whispered, stepping forward instinctively, drawn to him, "It's okay," but he shook his head violently, his voice rising with an edge of desperation. "You don't understand. That's not just a plaque, it's a constant reminder of everything I messed up. What if they can't forgive me?" Sarah's heart ached at the raw honesty in his voice. "But you're here to show them who you are now." She could feel the room holding its breath, caught in the tension between past and present. He exclaimed, pacing now, the weight of the room pressing down on him. "What if I'm still the guy who walked away?" "Jake," she urged, stepping closer, her voice steady. "You're not that same person anymore. You've grown. Everybody here knows what it's like to struggle." But he seemed lost in his own thoughts, grappling with doubt in the face of overwhelming emotion. "How can they?" I left without a word. I abandoned everything." His eyes darted around the room, assessing the faces, searching for validation, but all he could see were memories of everything he once held dear. Sarah felt a wave of frustration at the situation. Did he truly think anyone would only judge him by who he used to be? She said, desperation creeping into her voice, "It's about moving forward, not looking back." Jake looked back at the plaque, weighing her words carefully as if they were carefully stacked stones on a fragile bridge. Finally, he took a breath, his chest rising and falling like an ocean wave searching for its shore. "I don't know if I can," he murmured. Sarah stepped into his path, her determination shining through. "You don't have to face this alone." The crowd, sensing the emotional weight of the moment, began to murmur softly, encouraging him, rooting for his success. Jake took a shaky breath, glancing at the anxious faces. The hesitation that had clouded his expression began to shift. Deep within, there was a glimmer of something new. He whispered, vulnerability bleeding through his tough exterior. "You're here, standing in front of people who care. That's already something," Sarah reassured him, her voice firm and reassuring. "Face your fears instead of running from them." He turned to her, and for the first time their eyes locked without barriers. A moment passed, the world around them fading into a blur as the weight of the past held its breath. With a deep, reverberating breath, Jake stepped forward, a new spark igniting in his eyes. "Thank you for believing in me, Sarah," he said, voice steadier. "I'll try." The applause erupted again, this time with enthusiastic energy ringing through the center as hope blossomed like a flower breaking through cracked concrete. Sarah felt a swell of pride in her chest as she watched him reclaim his place in the very community he once abandoned. As Jake took a moment to gather himself, he glanced back at her, and she could see the gratitude, the newfound confidence flooding through him. For the first time, he wasn't just a boy haunted by the past, he was a man stepping into his future. But just as he began to speak again, the lights flickered, an uneasy disturbance rippling through the room. A shadow of uncertainty crossed his face, and Sarah felt the unease return like a dark cloud. Jake asked, eyes darting toward a hallway leading to the back of the center. Sarah's voice broke through the applause. But without answering, he turned and quickly walked away, leaving behind the warmth of the spotlight and the energy of the crowd. The sudden turn sent a shiver through Sarah, and uncertainty crept back in. She called after him, but he didn't look back. The room was now abuzz with curiosity, whispers flowing through the crowd. Sarah felt panic rising as she set off after him, weaving through the gathering, her heart racing. What was happening? Why would he walk away after taking such a bold step? Ultimately, she found him at the end of the hallway, leaning against the wall, breathing heavily as if he had run a marathon. He looked lost, the color draining from his face once more. She said, catching up to him. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration contrasting sharply with his earlier resolve. I don't know, but you were doing so well. I did not expect this, he snapped, the tension finally spilling over. What if everybody really doesn't forgive me? Tears tinged his eyes, and Sarah stepped closer, realizing how fragile he still was. You've taken a huge leap, he exclaimed, shaking his head. What if they think I'm a joke? Sarah reached for his arm, grounding them both in the moment. You've got to trust that this is part of the process. Something in her words seemed to reach him, the flicker of determination returning. Just as he began to draw a breath, they suddenly heard a commotion from the main hall. A loud crash shattered the moment. She turned, her heart racing. They rushed back to where the crowd had gathered, surprised chaos erupting before them. The table had toppled over, scattering items across the floor, and the air filled with gasps and raised voices. Tom called out, trying to regain control. In the midst of the chaos, Jake's face paled. I can't face them now. It's just a little chaos, Sarah insisted, but he was already pulling away again, uncertainty tightening its grip around him once more. Just then, she spotted something glinting on the floor near the fallen table. A small, framed photograph had slipped out from among the scattered items. She recognized it instantly. It was a picture of them both, taken from that last happy summer before he'd left. She exclaimed, bending to pick it up. When Jake saw it, his expression shifted. It was right here among all the commotion, she said, holding it out for him to see. Jake took it slowly, staring at the smiling faces frozen in time. The moment hung heavily in the air as he thought back to happier days, uncomplicated days filled with laughter and love. But then the memory shifted, darkened by reality as he remembered the guilt of leaving. Suddenly, something broke within him. No. He shouted, the photograph trembling in his hands. The crowd quieted, all attention now drawn to Jake and the emotion spilling out of him. Sarah felt her heart drop, realizing how much pain he still carried. Jake, don't, she began, but he pressed on, vulnerability washing over him. I can't live in the shadows of who I used to be. And with that, he turned and ran out of the hall, leaving Sarah standing among the fracturing tension, the growing unease filling the empty spaces he left behind. She cried out, adrenaline surging through her. She had to reach him, before he slipped away again. She broke into a sprint, weaving through the remnants of the crowd, her heart racing with every step. She shouted, tearing through the door and into the quiet night, searching desperately. The air was thick with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. In the distance, she saw him pacing back and forth, standing at the edge of the parking lot, the streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. She reached him breathless, a storm of emotions swirling around her. He cried, frustration bursting from him. What if I fail? Your fear is not the enemy, she insisted, her heart pounding. You have to let go, face your past. He looked at her, confusion flickering in his gaze, then back at the community center, the laughter and chaos still swirling within. Please, you have to believe that they will see who you are now, she said, imploring him with every breath. You're not alone. Suddenly, the sound of sirens pierced through the air, fading in from the distance, cutting across the late-night calm. He murmured, eyes darting toward the sound. A moment of realization flashed between them. Something was off. Without warning, the lights of a police car illuminated the parking lot, and a figure stepped out, urgency etched on their face. It was a moment that felt surreal. The officer called out, eyes scanning the area. Jake tensed, anxiety coursing through him as he shifted closer to Sarah, as if seeking refuge. Everything's fine, she began, but the weight of the situation pressed heavily around them. The officer's response was quick. They were checking for a disturbance, and now they were unwanted witnesses in an emotional corner of Jake's inner turmoil. The officer asked, stepping closer. Jake's breath hitched, and for a moment Sarah could sense his panic rising. This isn't how it was supposed to go, he whispered, fear creeping back into his voice as the situation around him felt more overwhelming. Jake, just breathe, she urged, knowing now was the time for clarity, not despair. Don't let this push you back into hiding, you can face this. But as fear tangled with uncertainty, she realized he was wavering. The night was unfolding in unexpected ways, and just as the weight of the moment threatened to crush them both, their world shrank to a single decision. Would Jake step back into the light, or would he let fear pull him into the shadows once again? And as that question hung in the air, Sarah held her breath, knowing everything depended on what came next.